Hi everyone, I'm Sam and welcome to the Shoogly Stitch. Hi, welcome back. I'm Sam. I live in central Scotland with my partner and a dachshund Poppy, and this is my channel where I talk about all things knitting related, spinning related, anything fiber arts for the most part. This is going to be a slightly special episode. Since Valentine's is coming up, I thought I would take the chance to look back at all of the things that I have made for my partner, boyfriend, whatever you want to call him, over the years. Maybe this will inspire you to make some different things or find some patterns for a loved one in your life. I know sometimes it can be a bit tricky to find men's sweater patterns, so I've got a few of those to show you. Plenty of socks and a couple hats, as well as a few works in progress. The structure of this special episode is going to be, I think, largely chronological, although there are a few things that I'm not entirely sure how they fit in, but I will generally stick to a chronological order. So let's get started. I think first I will provide a little bit of context about our relationship. So as I said, I live in Scotland with my partner and our dog. I met my boyfriend originally back when I was doing study abroad in my junior year of undergrad, back in 2016. Yes, 2016. I came over here in January and was here for a semester. We happened to meet, hit it off, obviously, and then I had to go home, so we did long distance for a little bit, and then he came to visit me for Christmas of 2016, and then I came back over here to do a master's degree in 2017, and then after that ended up getting a job in 2018, and the rest is history. I've been here ever since. So that's just a quick snapshot of our timeline. That'll give you some context for some of the things that I'm going to share about. So the first thing I have to show is a sweater, and I know what you're thinking. Why is the first thing that you made your boyfriend a sweater? Don't you know about the sweater curse? For those of you who haven't heard of the sweater curse, there's like a kind of, I don't know, superstition, old wives' tale out there that says if you make your boyfriend a sweater before you are married, then you will break up, or like it's bad luck basically. And I think maybe some of the theory behind that is that, you know, as a knitter, you put a lot of care and time into a project, and if you're dating someone that maybe doesn't appreciate how much care or how much time goes into that item, and then that you give them the sweater and they don't appreciate it or react how you had hoped, that can maybe be a sign of, I don't know, other things wrong in the relationship. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that so far it hasn't applied to me. I guess we're technically not married yet, but you know, we've been together for coming up on 7 years, so I'm not too concerned. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a sweater, like I was saying. And this is the sweater. It's quite hard to show such a large sweater on camera. This is the Fort by Jared Flood. So Jared, I think still works for Brooklyn Tweed, but this is definitely a Brooklyn Tweed pattern. And this is in Madeline Tosh Vintage and Flycatcher Blue. And so I made this while we were doing long distance. I made this for when Cameron was coming over to visit me in the US in like right after Christmas 2016. Miraculously, it fit. I mean, I did ask him for measurements and stuff, but yeah, it fit perfectly. So that's quite a result, because I generally really like people to try on the things that I make them. Now, he loves this sweater, wears it to death, has traveled with it before, and that is where an issue came in. So a different year, I think maybe 2019, we were headed home to visit my family so that was after I was already living in Scotland. We were heading home, and it takes 3 different flights to get back to where my family live, just because of being based in Scotland and then where they're based in Washington. Yeah, it just takes 3 flights no matter what route you go. So we were in the middle of doing, I think we were waiting for the second flight, and you know, you get really tired traveling. It's quite exhausting. Your schedule's all thrown off, etc. And this sweater, well, not this sweater, the first version of this sweater got left in, I think, the Minneapolis airport. And neither of us realized he had been wearing it, and then I think had taken it off because he got too warm in the airport or something. And yeah, it got set down. Neither of us realized until we were already on the flight to the next destination. So I honestly think he was more upset about it than I was. Like, I was pretty upset, but he was very, very upset, which, you know, in a kind of perverse way is quite, like, it showed me how much he how much he really, really loved that first thing that I ever made him. So I ultimately remade the sweater in 2020. So it's honestly, this is exactly what the first one looked like. This is an exact replica. He still wears it to death, so I don't regret remaking it at all. And it's kind of a funny story to laugh about now, but yeah. So that's the first thing I ever made Cameron, was this jumper. As far as the pattern goes, I have nothing but good things to say about Brooklyn tweed patterns. They are really easy to read. I think they always have really interesting construction. They're just like really classic fits. If you are knitting for someone who just wants something that looks kind of store-bought, or really like doesn't want to wear something that looks handmade or homemade, I think Brooklyn tweed is always a good resource to start out with. So I would definitely recommend the pattern. I wouldn't necessarily do it again in this yarn, and that's just because it is a superwash yarn and gets really drapey, and so it makes for quite a heavy sweater. Like, if I hold it up, I don't know, you can kind of see like just how much it wants to pull under its own weight. So if I were to do this pattern again, which it would be a nice pattern, like it's a really lovely texture. It's a knit purl texture. I don't know if that's called moss stitch. I don't know. It's I think it's 2 rows, or no, it's 2 by 2 knit and purl, and then every 2 rows they're like offset. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but you can maybe see, if I hold it up there closer, the texture. And I would have alternated skeins as well on this because it is a hand-dyed yarn to prevent pooling for the most part, although you can see a little bit up in that shoulder. I think the light in here makes it especially noticeable. So yeah, it's just a really nice kind of simple textured jumper, a really good classic, and like I said, he does wear it constantly, so that's always nice. So moving on to the second project I made, I think this would have been early 2017 or so. I think I was probably still back in the US, and that is a completely bonkers pair of socks. And these colors were by request. I mean, what? Look at this. I call them his clown socks. Literally, yeah, specifically asked for bright pink, bright yellow stripes, and contrast bright blue toes and heels and cuff. It's just a basic kind of vanilla sock pattern. My standard vanilla sock pattern is toe up with a flap and gusset heel. It was 3 different yarns. I couldn't tell you what they are. I don't have a Ravelry note for this. But yeah, that was the second thing I ever made him. Which probably would have made more sense as the first thing, but you know, live and learn. The third thing is a hat. So this is an improvised hat, which I don't necessarily love, but he wears it occasionally, and definitely wore it when I first gave it to him. And it is an improvised fisherman's rib hat, although I'm not actually convinced that I did the fisherman's rib correctly. I might have. It's quite hard to tell. It's really squishy, which is nice. And it's in using the accent colors of the football team he supports. I'll show you it on. That's actually massive for me. It's kind of big on him as well. You can see just how squishy it is. So, that's that. It's fine. I don't know. I would definitely find a better pattern now. But you know, it did the job. It's nice and cozy for if it's really, really cold. And I think that was around about late 2017, and that is all in Cascade Heritage Fingering. I think the next few things are going to be several pairs of socks. So obviously after making that first crazy pair, he wanted something a little bit more wearable. And so I went for this nice blue color. Here we go. And I'll put a kind of a close-up picture. These look a bit raggedy, to be honest. They've been worn to death, and I don't know that the sock yarn was the most sturdy sock yarn. It was from a local Glasgow dyer who has since closed down, called Queen of Pearls. And it's just a kind of nice tonal hand-dyed sock. There's a lovely texture on there as well. It's just with knits and pearls. It's not overly complicated. So yeah, these socks, obviously there's two of them, they look a bit worse for wear, and it's because they've been worn to death. And I've mended them at least once, and you can see my fingers basically through there. So they're in the pile to be mended again at the moment. But you know, I'm not like upset about that, because it does show that they get worn all the time and that he appreciates them. So I think that's actually the first mend that's already wearing through again. So I'll maybe try and use a stronger yarn for mending these ones, for mending the second time. And that is the Petty Harbour pattern, and that's by Raina Curtis. So I think these are probably 2019-ish. They all kind of blur together because there's a good few sock patterns, or socks, in there. The next one is kind of the start of something that we've been doing, something that I've been doing for a good while now. I started picking up sock yarn everywhere that I visited that had like a yarn shop. So if we were on holiday or on vacation, we would pick up some sock yarn as a souvenir, because one skein is like fairly reasonable price, doesn't cost too much, and then every time you wear that thing, it's a nice memory of the place that you visited. So this is the same pattern, the same like texture, that Petty Harbour texture, but this sock yarn is from Orkney. So we picked this up in Orkney when we were doing the North Coast 500 back in 2018, so I probably made the socks in 2019. And it's just a lovely kind of pale turquoise, again tonal, variegated sock. It's really nice. He loves them. He's like, these are my Orkney socks. So I definitely recommend that. If you're a sock knitter, picking up a skein of sock yarn is just a nice souvenir, no matter where you go. Because as well, you can usually find sock yarn at most like yarn shops. Like, it's a pretty easy thing to find. Most yarn shops will have at least one skein of sock yarn. Next pattern, I'll just show you these as well. There's nothing really hugely special about these. They are that same texture again, just because I know that I like it, and it's a bit more interesting than a vanilla sock, and this was kind of a scrappy pair. Yeah, I think this is Rosa Pomar Mondim, and I think this is West Yorkshire Spinners, just their 4-ply sock yarn. So both of these are fairly hard wearing, and yeah, he wears them as well. They look a bit funny on the feet, obviously, but like when you have them on with shoes, you can't really tell that they're a bit crazy down here. So that's another thing he appreciates. Not that he doesn't wear crazy socks, as you've seen, but yeah, just having a bit more versatility, because the blue cuff doesn't show through with the under jeans quite as much. So the next pattern is arguably one of the most impressive things that I've ever made. I'm quite proud of it. It is the Strandhus jumper by Vita Romanenkova. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This was in the Woolfolk collection from a few years ago, and it's an Aran jumper. How beautiful is that? I'm honestly so proud of it. I'll put in a better picture as well, but you can hopefully see the texture. So it's got like a honeycomb down the center. Yeah, honeycomb down the center, and then kind of a lattice on either side of the honeycomb, this smaller cable in between. You've got a moss stitch on the bottom part of the sleeves, and then similar honeycomb cable on the sleeves and a small cable there. Yeah, and it's a raglan construction. I believe this was, yes, so this was worked from the bottom up, and obviously it looks really complex. Cables, I think, look a lot more complex than they are, and also the patterns can be quite intimidating when you look at the charts to begin with. But actually I find when you start knitting a cable jumper, it's not like you get into the cable and you realize, oh, that it's actually fine. Like it starts to make sense, like you start to be able to kind of read where you are in the pattern, and it's not as complicated as you first thought it would be. This is in Jamieson's Shetland Heather, which is, I think it's a worsted weight yarn. I'll double check. It does make for quite a heavy jumper, so Cameron only wears this when it is really, really cold outside, but he does wear it. The only thing is, so I made a few modifications to this. This pattern was written to be worked flat and sewn together. At the time that I was knitting this, I didn't want to sew things together, so I modified it to be in the round, all the way from the bottom up to the arms, and then I knit the yoke of the front and the back flat. I also did the arms in the round, which I probably would do again. I probably would continue to make that modification because I don't see any point of knitting arms flat and sewing them up in general. Like there's some things, sometimes where it might make sense, but for this, it just seemed like a bit of extra work. And then, so yeah, it's called to be knit flat, and then you seam it up, and then you seam up the raglan as well. Now, the other issue I had with this, and I will show some before and after pictures if I can find them, is that, and even on the pattern photos, in hindsight, you can see the collar is really wide. And it's like wide enough to look peculiar so I followed the pattern and did exactly how it was written, and then Cameron put it on, and it's just like, that looks a bit funny. So he did wear it to begin with, but I think every time he wore it, I was like, that looks a bit weird, and he was like, that looks a bit weird. So eventually I actually ripped it back and fixed it. So if you look closely, you can see, I think you can see on the inside actually even more. You can see where I added extra length and to the pattern before redoing the ribbing. So obviously I had to sew together, let's see. I had to sew together the raglan, right? Let me turn this inside out. Okay, so if I turn this inside out, you can see where the seam is for the raglan. So here's obviously inside out, here's the sleeve, here's the main body. Here's the seam where I was joining the sleeve and the main body, right? And then you'll notice it stops here. That's because when I ripped it out, I didn't want to unseam everything and like completely knit flat, knit this a bit, knit flat this sleeve a bit longer, knit the front flat a bit longer, knit the other sleeve a bit longer, etc., etc. So what I actually did was I ripped back the collar, just the ribbing part, because it is a folded collar. So I just ripped back the collar, and then I picked up all the way around the entire thing. So instead of adding that extra couple inches, it's probably a good 2 inches, 2.5 inches. Instead of adding that flat and then seaming it again, I added that by picking it all up in the round and knitting in the round. And then I obviously redid the collar. It's much shorter than it was originally. It's only about 1 inch, but it looks fine when it's on. I think it looks quite good when it's on. And that just made it sit a lot higher up, and it just made it a lot more wearable, because one of my pet peeves is when you can see like a t-shirt under your collar. Like if I actually wear this cardigan buttoned up, you kind of can see my t-shirt. I don't love it. I probably need to reblock this and see if I can get it a little bit flatter. But I find a lot of patterns don't get that collar up high enough for my preference. It's not like I want it choking me, but I do want it like just a normal collar that you might find on a store-bought jumper. And I think a lot of hand knit patterns kind of struggle with that. So yeah, that was I wouldn't necessarily, like, there's nothing really wrong with the pattern aside from that collar bit. So if you know that in advance and can modify to fix that, then it's probably fine. But it has certainly made me a lot more cautious going forward about looking at the pattern photos and looking exactly at like what the projects people have done and seeing how the collars fit them, because it's those small details that make things not wearable. So if you're annoyed at those small details and it bothers you every time you put it on, you're just not going to wear it. So it certainly made me pay a lot more attention to those small details when I pick out patterns. But in general, yeah, I'm really pleased with this. It's like, I feel so proud when I get to tell people like, oh, I made this, or show it off. And it always makes me really happy when I see him wearing it as well. I think there's a special kind of, warm, cozy feeling that you get when someone that you care about, like not just a partner or boyfriend, but like your parents or family members or a good friend, and you see them wearing and enjoying that thing you've made. Like, I don't even care if something gets kind of destroyed or worn to bits, because it just means that person has actually really appreciated that thing that you made for them. So yes, this is the Strandhus sweater. Okay, next up we have another hat. So this is the Midnattsol Hat by the Petite Knitter. Not Petite Knits, the Petite Knitter. And it is obviously a stranded colorwork hat. I quite like this hat. It is a good pattern. I was just looking for a nice pattern that would use a lot of colors, be a bit different, and yeah, this did the trick. My only complaint, and this is not with the pattern, this is just with like my knitting, is that I find the stranded color work to be a bit tight, so even when I put it on just there, I felt like I was squeezing my head a bit, and I know that would really quite annoy me, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, it's just, I know I need to be more cautious about either sizing up or maybe going up a needle size when I do that stranded knit. I wouldn't say this is super beginner friendly, because there are certainly quite a few rows where there are 3 colors being worked, which makes it a bit more tricky than just 2 color work, but it's not too bad overall. If you have done stranded color work with 2 colors and you want to dip your toe into advancing a little bit and try 3 colors, this is a good small enough pattern. Like a hat is a good way to get started on that. So yeah, I'm really happy with this, and I think, I'm not sure if I said, but this is Cascade 220. So a good basic yarn. Maybe not always designed for stranded knitting, but I think it actually works fine. Like, it looks pretty good. The stitches are blurred together enough. It's not like there's gaps because of the smoother nature of the yarn. So yeah, that was the next project, and that was that was for Christmas 2019 that I made this. Okay, next up I have another pair of socks. Shock. And I can't really remember exactly when I made these, but I'll just put them in here now. So this is kind of another souvenir idea. I picked up this yarn when we were back home in, we might have got it in December 2019 when we were home visiting family, but I'm not entirely certain. But that sounds right. Yeah, so this was from my local yarn store back home called Pearl 2. And yeah, he picked the color out. It's quite a fun kind of variegated greeny, yellowy brown. And this is again just a vanilla pair of socks. It's worn quite well. I'm not sure that he's worn them quite as much as some of the others, but it's also probably slightly thicker yarn than some of the others. I think that the blue pair that I had made that had worn through was maybe on the lighter side of fingering, so they definitely wore through quicker. So yeah, that's the next pair. Right, another pair of socks. Seems like all I do is make him socks. But I mean, you'll have seen how hard work that sweater was, so. These are the intersection sock by Marceline Smith from 52 Weeks of Socks by Lina magazine. This book here, Intersections. Yeah, I don't have too much memory of the process of making these. They are a cabled texture sock. I think they're really lovely. I think I made them a tiny bit too tight, so he struggles to get them on a little bit over the... These are, I believe, in John Arbon Exmoor sock, if I'm remembering correctly. Just a lovely forest green cabled texture. Yeah, not tons to say about them. They're really nice. I think they have a slightly different heel construction from what I've done before. It's kind of like a gusset and short row heel, which is a bit unusual. So I should probably revisit that because I've been wondering about something that was a bit in between like flap and gusset and short row heels. And this seems to have that. So I'm not sure that you can see very well on camera, but you can see that there's like kind of a gusset here, like that is increasing the stitches. And then, but it is a short row, there's not like a flap. So it's quite interesting. I should go back to those and see what that pattern was all about. I just have 2 more pairs of socks. And then I'll show off the couple things that that are works in progress. So I have made a couple pairs of shorty socks. There we go. These were more souvenir socks. These are from a yarn shop up north in Scotland from when we were on holiday, I think in 2020. So yeah, another nice souvenir sock. And I went for a short one that time, just for a bit of variety. Tends to wear those a little bit more when it's warmer out. These are the most recent sock, and these are with Zauberball Crazy Zauberball, and West Yorkshire Spinners is the black. And another pair of short socks. That Crazy Zauberball is just like a lot of fun. It's the kind of gradually color changing yarn, so you can see how it changes. I quite often stripe it with itself, but I don't have any examples of that handy. So yeah, but just to use up the end of a ball, I was striping it with this black. So they're the same ball of yarn, but not quite matchy-matchy. All right, now on to my works in progress. So I'll show off the first 2 small ones. There's not too much to say about them. I do have a pair of socks in progress. Shock. Because I always have a pair of socks in progress. These are looking slightly funny because they are like a ribbed cable texture. I've made it up. So it's just a vanilla sock pattern, and I added a cable texture to it. It's kind of hard to see. Shows up better in real life. So these are, I do have these socks on the go. These are actually in my own handspun though. So I've made myself a pair of socks in handspun yarn, and then these are the other ones that the next skein of handspun that I had done. It's all balled up here. It's kind of grays and browns and blues. I don't know that it really needed a textured pattern, but I thought something a bit different would be fun. So anyways, that's what's happening there. I've not been working on them tons lately, but they're kind of there in the background for when I do want to work on them. And like I said, it's just a simple cabled pattern that I made up. The other project that I'm working on at the moment is another hat. And this is the Ponderosa Hat by Wool & Pine. So it's a cabled hat pattern, and the yarn is another souvenir yarn. So we were on holiday in Milan last year, and they actually didn't have any local sock yarn. They did have sock yarn, but it was from dyers that were not actually local. And I really like to pick up something like not just sock yarn when I'm on holiday, but something local to the area or from like a local dyer, local producer, etc. Because I just feel like that makes a nicer kind of connection. So instead of getting sock yarn, I got this blue yarn Our camera picked out this blue yarn and I got like a cream. And this is from a local producer, and it's something that I definitely wouldn't be able to pick up anywhere here. This is the actual yarn. It's just a nice single ply, probably about DK weight. So yeah, it's really nice, really lovely blue color, quite happy with it. The pattern itself is fairly straightforward. It's a cabled hat, like nothing groundbreaking, but I think it'll be really nice when it's done. And I've not made camera in a cabled hat before. Cabled jumper, yes. Cabled hat, no. So that's that. Those are those two smaller projects. And then there is this project, right? So this has been, originally was meant to be a Christmas present in 2021. And a lot of it went fine until it didn't go fine. So this is kind of like my take on the Yule Sweater by Susan Crawford, from her book, The Vintage Shetland Project. So this is the Vintage Shetland Project, which is honestly just an amazing reference book. She went like to Shetland and looked in their archives and museums and recreated all of these vintage projects in like for the modern knitter. So I really liked, and Cameron really liked, the Yule pattern, because I don't usually, aside from that first sweater I made him, other than that, I've had him be involved in choosing the patterns because there's no point making someone something that they're never going to wear. So he's involved in picking out the patterns. Right, so I wanted to make this, but as you can see in this pattern, I get the glare, it is a roll neck or like a turtleneck, and it's also kind of written to be cropped because it's very much a vintage style where men wore their jumpers more like at their natural waist, and you can see it on a woman there as well. So, but the basic pattern, really lovely, Fair Isle Shetland style. Okay, I've done Fair Isle stranded knitting before. I mean, I've obviously done this and it turned out fine. So I was like, great, I'm fine, like I'll do this pattern, like it'll be fine. It'll be an interesting new challenge to do a completely Fair Isle jumper. What a great idea. No, not a great idea. The Fair Isle has not been the problem. The Fair Isle is fine. I can do stranded knitting, not an issue. The issue is, I was like, oh yeah, I could definitely convert this vintage written pattern into a more modern fitting pattern just by winging it. No, you need to do like math and stuff, which I can do that. I just wasn't thinking about it. I was like, oh, you know, I'll just knit it as, like knit the neckline as it calls for and just not make a roll neck, like not make it as long. Obviously that's not going to work. And then I didn't like how the sleeves were written, so I kind of made up my own decrease situation. So I'll show you the jumper anyways. This is where we're at. It's basically done. Yay! It's basically done. So the original pattern is knit from the bottom up, and then the neckline is a bit odd in my opinion. It's literally just like a slit for the neck. So you would knit a big rectangle and then seam the shoulders together, and then there's just a slit for the neck, and then you knit the collar up from that. So it's not like there's any neck shaping in the pattern as written. So that obviously wasn't going to work if I didn't want to do a turtleneck. So I needed to add in my own shaping. And I just didn't like think it out well enough. Like in hindsight, obviously I would have needed to do a bit of shaping, but I just wasn't thinking about it. So when I first started out, I just stopped the neck. Like I put stitches on hold for the neck and then continued knitting more for the shoulders. And then that made a really awkward like square hole. So that didn't look very good. And then I ripped that back, and then I actually did put some shaping in here, which has turned out okay, but the neckline is still really wide. It's meant to be a folded collar, so you can see that this is like on a needle. And this collar needs to be folded over. So it'll be a folded over collar like this. That doesn't look great. Anyways, it'll be folded over, fine. However, I got all the way to this point and it's got the same like wide neckline issue that, because obviously I was just making this up as I went. Silly me. Next time I'll find a pattern written by someone who like has written like a modern shaped jumper instead of just trying to make it up myself. Or if I do make it up myself, I just need to like plan it out better. The issue is I just didn't plan. I just was kind of winging it, which is not really what you should do in Fair Isle because the ripping back gets really annoying. Anyways, so currently it's on hold because I need to sort the neckline out. I think I need to add like more, I need to pick up some more of these stitches and just make the shoulder part a bit wider on both sides, like maybe only, like you can see it's a bit angled here, like I've already got some shaping there, so I just need to kind of bring that in a few more stitches. The other issue with the sleeves, they're fine now. I think I also had some gauge problems. I don't think I got gauge, and I put this on hold a couple times and then forgotten what needle size I was using. And because I was doing the arm shaping in a different way. So the pattern is written to like, you knit a motif and then you decrease like 10 stitches and then you knit another motif and decrease like another 10 stitches. Like the decreases were really like not even throughout the entire sleeve. They were like 10 stitches at a time, like 5 times throughout the sleeve or something. And I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to just like decrease every other row like you probably normally would in a lot of patterns. So because I wanted to do that, I had to rip back a couple times because my like rate of decreases wasn't fast enough. Yeah. So because that was fine, like I guess not the end of the world, but it did cause me to rip back a couple times. Because I ripped back so many times, I think it like compressed the yarn I was using. So one of these sleeves is slightly bigger than the other. I don't know, it's not actually that visible as I hold it up now. Like I think it may be blocked out, or will block out, but certainly when I was knitting it, I think one of the sleeves, the yarn still had more air trapped in it because I wasn't working with yarn that had been ripped out, like frogged once or twice. So yeah, they knit up to like very slightly different gauges. As I say, I'm pretty sure it'll block out. Like it looks fine as I'm holding it up here. They don't really look different, or if they are different, it can definitely be blocked out. But it's just another thing to add to the list. So it's currently in timeout because I got really, really tired of working on this. And now that I'm holding it up, I'm like, wow, this looks so impressive and I should just finish it because it probably won't even take that long. So hopefully that'll get done this year. Definitely a labor of love, and if I make another Fair Isle jumper, which I probably will because it is entertaining and like really satisfying to see it work up, I'll definitely be finding a pattern from someone who has written a pattern to fit the way I want it to fit instead of trying to so heavily modify this. The other thing I could have done in hindsight is find a pattern where that I already liked and just fit the Fair Isle motifs from the Yule Sweater onto it. Also an option. So yes, the Yule Sweater, heavily modified by Susan Crawford in Jamieson and Smith, 4-ply or 2-ply jumper weight. 4-ply, yeah, anyways, they're jumper weight yarn. I really like the colors. I have nothing but good things to say about the yarn itself, and I think it'll be really cozy when it's done. So yeah, that is all of the projects that I have made for my boyfriend. It's really satisfying to actually look back through everything and think about how often it's worn. It makes me really happy that he actually does wear everything that I make him and that he is really appreciative of those projects. I certainly couldn't ask for anyone who's more knit-worthy. As you can see, I don't think the sweater curse applies. I'm certainly not worried about it. And if you want to let me know about any projects you've made for, you know, partners or loved ones in your life, I'd love to hear about them. I'm always looking for more men's jumper patterns, as I find those a bit tricky to find at times. Also, let me know if you've done the yarn souvenir thing. I can't be the only one out there. So that is all I have to say for today. I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a like or a comment. Feel free to subscribe if you want to hear more about all these projects I get up to. And thanks for watching. Bye!